It would be enough to lose the moon just once in order to realize just how important it is. There was a time just after its birth when our planet was spinning through space all alone in orbit around the sun. But after some period of time, a lucky coincidence changed its destiny. This is the case when something seemingly horrible gave birth to beautiful. An unknown object the size of Mars crashed into the early Earth, and a huge, really big chunk of our planet broke away. After this terrible, at first glance, collision, the debris settled into orbit around the planet, coalesced, and eventually formed the moon. Not long after, life appeared on our Earth. There is a scientific opinion that it is the moon that provided the Earth with the conditions necessary for the birth of life on our planet. One could say that the moon gave life to the Earth. And in that vein, it is our cosmic companion in our scenario that will be able to take that life back again. A most real apocalypse awaits us in the event of the sudden disappearance of our moon. We have discussed various forms of apocalypse previously, but never this worst-case scenario. The fact is, the moon has a colossal influence on our oceans. In orbit around the Earth, the moon's gravity attracts our planet's water masses. Two humongous bulges are created in our oceans, one closest to the moon and the other opposite it on the far side of the planet. The ocean level in these places is much higher than on other parts of our planet. We know these bulges as tides. Thus, the moon helps create the tides as it rolls through its orbit. The powerful gravitational forces of the sun also affect the Earth's tides, but to a much lesser degree, as the sun, though massive, is almost 400 times farther from the Earth than the moon. If you were to remove the moon from this system, all control over the oceans would immediately go to the sun, and this would lead to catastrophic consequences. Let me make this easier for you. This is the Earth, and this is the entire mass of the world's oceans. The moon drags water towards itself, pulling the water into a kind of ocean dome. The sun, in turn, draws water towards itself, creating a slightly smaller dome on the other side. To remove the moon from this equation is like removing your fingers from a bowstring. All the excess water now immediately rushes back down to sea level, creating a massive, ultra-destructive super tsunami wave. If the moon disappears during a full moon, the scale of the cataclysm will be a little less damaging, since it will be in line, cosmically speaking, with the sun. But if this happens when the moon is in a different position relative to the sun, on opposite parts of our dear planet, then two giant walls of water reaching up to 59 feet in height will rush from opposite sides of the globe to meet each other. All of this crushing power, without a drop of regret, will ravish every coastline on Earth, devastating everything in its path. The inhabitants of these areas, with 100% likelihood, will be witness to the beginning of the end of human civilization, and many will die. But the global end will not come from the ocean. Although this event will be of a titanic scale, it's still just a one-time thing. After the mega tsunami, the oceans will calm down and fall under the control of just the sun. The tides won't stop, but they will be much smaller. But life on our beautiful blue planet will never be the same again. The turmoil in the world's oceans will severely damage the Gulf Stream, which will lead to absolutely unpredictable climate changes. But this still isn't so terrible, relatively speaking. Yes, it's probable that our ways of life on our various continents would change. The production of agricultural food products and various raw materials would be affected. But this is a mere trifle. The climate will suffer much more from the now altered tilt of the Earth. In addition to tidal forces in our oceans, lunar gravity affects the inclination of our planet relative to its axis. The axis of the Earth's rotation is similar to that of a top, slowly swinging through its full cycle every 26,000 years. At present, the Earth is under the gravitational influence of both the sun and the moon. But if we remove the moon, we remove the strongest stabilizing force of our planet. Under the influence of just the sun, our Earth will begin to shimmy and shake, and in much different directions, as happens with Mars. This cosmic scale process will abolish the usual change of seasons. There will be no more winter, spring, summer, or fall. There will be continuous chaos. The temperature will begin to oscillate like a pendulum clock. It could reach up to 80 degrees Fahrenheit in the afternoon, but by morning drop to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit, just like on the Martian equator, as according to Wikipedia. What will be the variation in temperature in our case? God only knows. In a word, global warming will seem like some kind of toasty resort compared to the hell that will begin soon after the disappearance of the moon. We should note that human beings are unlikely to completely die out. Some will find a way to survive. There will be the largest application of the law of natural selection in the history of our species. Some of the weak may go to other worlds. The strong will become even stronger as they adapt to the harsh new environmental conditions. It will be a new world, completely unknown to us, and will need to be studied anew. Now let's talk about the ocean. As with the climate, the oceans are also important to the other inhabitants of our planet who will be on the edge of the abyss without the moon. You may not know it, but the entire food chain in the oceans is very tightly connected to the moon. Many marine organisms arrange their movements in accordance with our lunar companion. Algae move towards moonlight to the surface in the evening, and those who feed on them come up after them, and so on up the food chain. When this phenomenon disappears, then a significant share of existing species will die out, and new, still unseen, and unimaginable creatures will appear instead. All this will inevitably affect the world's economy and people's lives in general. And now the most important part. How? How can this giant hunk of space rock disappear? It's very simple. The most realistic scenario is an explosion. If the moon explodes, then it disappears. It's all quite logical. Much would depend on the strength and direction of this explosion. If it's powerful enough to turn our satellite into cosmic dust, then we could expect all of the previously mentioned cataclysms and a completely new and unpredictable planet. If the force of the explosion is directed towards our planet, and at the same time its power would be such that the moon would scatter all of its constituent fragments, then many of these bits and pieces will sooner or later hit the Earth and crash to the ground. But the multitude of impacts will be much less than when a meteorite falls, as they will be traveling much more slowly and, most likely, will impact the terrain along a tangent, which will greatly reduce their effect. But it will still be quite noticeable for us Earthlings. But what else will happen if the moon explodes, you may ask? Well, in fact, not so much. In a past video, we talked about a similar phenomenon, in which a beam of gamma energy is thrown off by a nearby dying star and touches our dear satellite. Technologically speaking, this may one day become commonplace in the far, far distant future. Technological process will grow to such heights that people will not only be able to disintegrate moons, but their host planets too, and possibly even spark the birth of new stars. It's like what we sometimes see in Hollywood films, where some jerk wants to destroy the moon with his super hyper laser blaster, or maybe it's aliens. Well, if they are developmentally superior to us and hostile, then they could quite easily arrange such an apocalyptic scenario for us. And maybe this has already happened. Maybe this doomsday scenario has already played out on Mars. What if the red planet has already experienced all of this in the distant past? Write in the comments what you think and subscribe to the channel. Put your finger up if you want more of these videos.